Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show, Week 13 Rankings Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to celebrate Thanksgiving by getting those fantasy lineups right and hopefully earning bragging rights over those same family and friends that we are hopefully sharing this lovely holiday with. The man joining me to help us accomplish that very task, the one, the only Dwain, the Rock McFarland in the house. What's up, Dwain?
Yeah, man, doing great. And that was a great task you just named because you know what? My wife, Amanda, is going to be wearing all of her Chiefs gear tomorrow as we go to hang out with her family. Now, look, she's a Cowboys fan. Was always a Cowboys fan first, but when our son went to Texas Tech, she used that as the opportunity to switch to the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. So I have to say it's a pretty smart move by her. Like using that opportunity to say, well, here's my reason I'm going to be a Chiefs fan. And it's worked out pretty good for her. But, you know, the whole family's going to give her a lot of crap if she wears all that gear and the Cowboys pull off the win. I have to say that.
Deservedly so, but hey, you know, maybe she'll be walking the walk when it happens. So get your popcorn ready for that one, or I guess pumpkin pie or whatever we want to use to celebrate the occasion. Dwain, though, before we get into the show, we do have a start-sit Thanksgiving theme question from our guy Greggy in the chat. Start, marry, kill, Dwain. Sweet potato casserole, stuffing, and brisket mac and cheese.
Yeah, so look, it depends on whose stuffing it is. Like some stuffing is really good, Ian. It's kind of like the turkey conversation we had earlier this week. Nobody wants a dry turkey, you know, from your great-great-grandmother. But, you know, you tell me you're going to fry it up. You're going to, you know, inject it with some Cajun, you know, sauces and stuff like that. Like, I'm down. I want some turkey. So the dressing, if it's done right, though, and the way my grandmother used to do it, man, sorry, I'm marrying that. But it has to be done the right way. Stuffing, dressing. We call it dressing down here. Up north, it's called stuffing. It's the same thing. It's like a cart and a buggy, you know, in a grocery store, Ian. And then I would say, you know, man, the mac and cheese brisket, you know, sounds pretty good. So I think I'm going to start that. Man, I don't know. This is so tough. Actually, you know what? I have to kill that because like that's not I love that. That's really great. You know, Friedman and I go get barbecue and there's a place we go to, Ian, that actually has that mac and cheese with brisket. Ooh. And I showed it to Friedman and like that was his whole lunch one day. He had a big cup of it. And it looked really freaking amazing. But I'm going to have to go with the sweet potatoes though. You know, the sweet potato. I don't really do sweet potato casserole, but man, my both of my grandparents make really good sweet potatoes. So I'm gonna stick with those two. Although the mac and cheese with brisket is still fire.
I've been penalizing mac and cheese as well. Not that there's anything against mac and cheese. I love mac and cheese, but just not a Thanksgiving food in my humble, horrible opinion generally. So good stuff, Dwain. I'll say you passed. And in honor of you passing, I just want to go ahead and announce a sale, guys. 40% off Fantasy Live Plus this Black Friday window for a Fantasy Live Plus subscription. That's 40% off for 12 full months of fantasy football. This is not that thing where some people are like, oh yeah, here's a sale. You can have it for the next 6 weeks. Full 12 months, guys. So if you plan on re-upping, you know, by the end of next year, before next season and stuff, seems like a pretty good chance to do so with 40% off. Get all of our ranks, projections, all the utilization report goodness. Again, 40% off. All you have to do is use code BF40 to, again, get one of the best Fantasy Life Plus offers of the year. The deal will end on November 30th, so make sure you get that in soon. Again, that's BF40 to get Fantasy Life Plus for 40% off. So with all that said, guys, let's get into the show. It's time for our DraftKings opening lines. Going to be going through a lot of the injuries as we get to the position groups, as always here on the Fantasy Live Show, but do have a couple notes we want to start off the show with. First of all, Dwain, Jeremy Fowler did report that there is a realistic possibility Jaden Daniels with his left elbow returns to play in Week 14. Obviously, this season, a little bit of the over variety for the Commanders, but as Bill Parcells once said, football players play football during football season, so I do expect guys like Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow continuing to play once the doctors deem them healthy enough to do so. Also note the Seahawks signed running back Cam Akers, more so just a thing with George Holani being placed in IR with that hamstring injury. The real big, I guess, update and just surprising news today, Dwayne, would be Drake London suffering, obviously, had that knee injury. We had heard reports, I think, at the end of last week that he was expecting to be back for Week 13. However, Raheem Morris did say that he actually considers London doubtful for this one. So did you see enough from Cousins and company to have any sort of faith in Darnell Mooney or Kyle Pitts ahead of this week?
Confidence? No. Maybe startable, possibly. Look, here's the thing. Darnell Mooney over the last 3 games has a 25% target share. So like he's looking the healthiest he's looked all year. Last week, he only had 3 targets, but he did catch one of them for a touchdown. But still, over the last 3 games, like he's been a better player. So I think Darnell Mooney, wide receiver 4 territory is what I would say, Ian. Not sure where you have him. But then Kyle Pitts, last weekend, he was actually the most active guy in the passing game. He had a 25% target share. That was one of his best marks of the season. Obviously did not come through in your fantasy box score, though, which is what you guys care about the most, with only 4.5 points. So I think it's pretty straightforward, though. Like you're going to throw the ball to Kyle Pitts, you're going to throw the ball to Darnell Mooney, and you're going to throw the ball to Bijan Robinson. Like those are your 3 guys, with Drake London out. So I think if you're in a pinch, like Pitts, borderline tight end 1, high end tight end 2 in that range, and then Mooney's a wide receiver 4.
Let's see. I updated my ranks over at fantasylife.com. Recently, I have Mooney as my wide receiver 40 still. So pretty much next to you, Dwain, at wide receiver 39. Yeah. Make sure you guys continue to check that out. Also note that 49ers wide receiver Brandon Ayuk with his knee still won't have his 21-day practice window open. And the Bills also cut wide receiver Elijah Moore. Sorry to our CEO of Fantasy Life, Elliot Chris. One day, man, Elijah Moore will work out again. Over in the tight end streets, Dalton Kincaid still not practicing with that hamstring injury. Also note Darren Waller limited with that pec issue. Maybe he is going to be able to return as soon as this week. Again, he has had his practice window open. Otherwise, Dwayne, really the big news other day, other than the London update, was 4-time Pro Bowl retired center Frank Ragnow now coming out of retirement to rejoin the Detroit Lions. Kind of a nice, full circle moment for a franchise that's had dudes like Calvin Johnson, retire early because of a sad state the franchise was in. Now we got, a longtime stud center unretiring. It's good feels, Dwayne.
Yeah, man. Look, and these guys that, have played long careers and they get a chance to come back to their team they were with for a long time and potentially have a playoff run. Like, man, why not? You played, you paid your dues for a long time. You're a good player. You rested up. You're feeling good. Let's just get Aaron Donald back to the Rams, Ian, to go on the other side of that potential playoff matchup. The Lions still have some work to do, though, to make sure they get into the playoffs. But yeah, I'm down for all the good feels, just like you.
Otherwise, guys, let's get into the show with some running back talk. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick word to our friends at DraftKings. Big games, big moments, and even bigger upside this week. I teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6 to give you a new way to get in on the action. With Pick 6, you can ride the upside by making simple predictions. Will a player score more or less than the number listed? Stack your picks together, and the more you hit, the bigger your payout. And right now, guys, there's an incredible offer for new customers. If you play $5 or more, you'll get $50 in Pick 6 credits. That's right, new DraftKings customers play $5, you get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly. So don't miss your shot to ride the upside. Download DraftKings Pick 6. Get on all the action. Sign up using my promo code Fantasy Life. Thanks to DraftKings Pick 6 for sponsoring this. Let's make this season one to remember. We are top 24 running backs on the board right now. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us via YouTube, Roku, wherever you may be. Mr. RB1, Jahmyr Gibbs leading things off, followed by Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, Bijan Robinson, and James Cook. RB7 through 12, we got Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, and yes, Travion Henderson, despite the return of Ramondre Stevenson, still very much inside our top 12. As we move on to the RB2 side of things, Javonte Williams sitting there as the RB13, followed by Rico Dowdle, Travis Etienne, Ashton Genty, who did manage to practice today. Good news there. RJ Harvey, Bucky Irving, Breece Hall, Quinshawn Judkins, Kenneth Walker, Jalen Warren, Woody Marks, and Tyrone Tracy, rounding out the top 24. Dwayne, we did actually hear from the Buccaneers saying that Bucky's first game back could resemble Chris Godwin's in terms of him being on a little bit of a snap count. Will you be adjusting the ranks accordingly?
Yeah, in the projections right now, I think I have Bucky right at 50% of the rushing attempts in the first game back, but I may cut that down a little bit more. I may make it more like 40%. We'd probably have Sean Tucker second in carries, and then I would have Rachaad White last, but getting the passing down work. So yeah, I probably will have to make a slight adjustment for Bucky.
Otherwise, let's get into it with our riser of the week, someone who's certainly been a staple in lineups, but we really are expecting some fireworks now, and that is Ravens RB1, Derrick Henry, going up against a Bengals defense that, has not been anything close to good this year. Dwayne, he's your RB7. He's my RB6. King Henry, let's see some Thursday night fireworks.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with Henry, man, since the return of Lamar Jackson in week 9, the Ravens have essentially said their identity is just going to be playing smash mouth football. Their dropback rate over expected over that period, Ian, is -7%. So that is the second lowest number or third lowest number in the NFL over that span. And then the other thing that's really cool that I looked up using our utilization suite of tools, guys, and if you want to get that for 40% off, use the Black Friday deal. But 21 personnel, guys. So we're talking about 2 running backs and 1 tight end, or 22 personnel. So that's 2 running backs and 2 tight ends. Basically, you've got a fullback on the field in both of these scenarios. And in their case, it's Patrick Ricard. The Wikipedia nickname is Pancake Pat, but Ian says it is denied because it's not officially over on Pro Football Reference, which is his official source of nicknames. But the point being, 21% and 21 personnel and 18% of their plays in 22. That's 39% of the time they're running a fullback out there on the field, Ian, and a lot of times with another running back, or they're doing it also with another tight end. So yeah, the Ravens, they're just opting to say, we're not using wide receivers. They rank the lowest in 3 wide receiver sets over that span. So it's just nice to see it, man. You love seeing a team that just goes to this throwback style of football. And who else is better for that than Derrick Henry, man? Yeah, and you already mentioned it. Getting to play against the freaking Bengals, 7.9 fantasy point boost per game. That's number 1 in the NFL, guys. Matchup for running backs per our DVP tool. So yeah, pretty big ceiling here, 23.8. Not as high as some of the other guys because he's not as involved in the passing game, guys. But still plenty of room here. We could see Derrick Henry score 2 rushing touchdowns easily in this smash spot.
It is kind of wild where I get it. Henry hasn't been a smash this year, not a major bust or anything, but you draft him as a top 8, probably RB. He's been close to RB 14, RB 15 on a per game basis. Still on pace for 1,500 total yards and 14 touchdowns, those guys. And again, if he goes off against the Bengals in 2 of these next 3 matchups, like we think he will, could certainly be pushing that up even more. Hopefully, again, coming on strong down the stretch when you guys need him most in the fantasy playoffs. Then want to run through a handful of other names, Dwain, starting off with, again, that consensus RB 12, Mr. Travion Henderson, going up against the Giants defense that maybe not quite as bad as the Bengals, but man, they're pretty close.
Yeah, they are pretty close. And like you mentioned earlier, we had Trevion retain most of the workload with Ramondre Stevenson back. We talked about on the utilization report, like we don't know for sure, like might they be easing Mondre back in? It doesn't really matter this week, man. You can't be shy about this matchup, Ian. You've got against the Giants. It's the number 2 fantasy boost right behind the Bengals at 7.5 points per game to opposing running back rooms. We also have the Patriots with the 4th highest team total, and they're 7.5 point favorites. So high team total plus big favorites in a really good matchup. That's what we call a smash spot, Ian. So even if we do see, Ramondre take over a little bit more work than what we saw last week, it's still a great spot for Trevion Henderson.
RB5 in PPR points per game since getting his first start in week 9. Hopefully the good times keep on rolling there. Also join Travis Etienne, RB14 in PPR points per game this year. And it's like none of you even care. Set up against the Titans defense that honestly hasn't been that bad against the run unless they're playing Jonathan Taylor, of course, but still a situation where he's your RB16. He's my RB15. Yeah, not bad, I would say, for a guy who entered the season with an ADP as the RB37.
Yeah, we're the 2 lowest rankers on him. And I did think I was going to be even higher, but your point being like Travis Etienne, a week ago, it was, gloom and doom. Bajal Tutin is taking over. And now look at it. But man, over these last 4 weeks, 17.5 fantasy points per game, running back 12, 13, 11, and running back 7 finishes over that span. Been a very usable player. 6.5 point favorites this weekend with a 24.5 team total. The only reason he came down a little bit for me is because in the projection model, I use Friedman's betting game model, guys, which you guys should too. He has a 5-star bet in here for the Titans to cover this spread right now with where it's sitting. And so using Friedman's model, it's a 2.5. The Jaguars are 2.5 point favorites with a slightly lower team total. So that impacts his projection a little bit, but still really good mid-range running back too, that he's going to be in most starting lineups. And Friedman, what are you doing? I brought this down because of your model and you've got him ranked higher than me. Come on, man.
Also got Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker taking on the Vikings. Dwayne, he's your RB22, my RB21. And as we talked about on the utilization report show on Tuesday, really has been trending in the right direction over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing. Like and if you look at the last two games, he's got his snap shares up over 50%, 51%, 64% over those two games, 16.6 fantasy points on 13.5 attempts per game with 3.5 targets per game. So Seattle has the fifth best team total this weekend, Ian, at 26 points, and they're 10.5-point favorites over the Vikings. So massive favorites. Big team total. We've got a trend moving in the direction of Kenneth Walker. I would say low end running back 2 this week, y'all.
Next one's interesting. Omarion Hampton has been, has had his practice window open, I should say, going up against the Raiders. If we knew Omarion Hampton was good to go in this spot, I mean, rank him as the RB5 for all I care. We'd be absolutely thrilled here. Of course, we do have to wonder, could there be a bit more of a committee? Greg Roman said they're expecting more of a 1-2 punch with him and Kamani Vidal. We also don't even know yet if he is for sure going to be playing. So I would say, Dwain, I would have some level of caution a la Bucky Irving. Probably have him more so as a low-end RB2. I'm thinking maybe like around Kenneth Walker, honestly. How do you feel if Omarion Hampton does in fact suit up for this matchup?
Yeah, so I've got Hampton in the ranks right now, and I've got him as a borderline running back 2. So right there in that high-end running back 3 territory, but in a group of guys where if you guys were feeling it on him, like you could move him 3 or 4 spots up or 3 or 4 spots down pretty easily. So when you hear us use that term borderline, that's usually what it means. And whenever you look at Hampton, Ian, the big thing here is you've got the Chargers as 10-point favorites over the Raiders, and they've got a 25.75-point team total. And it's a team that's been running the ball more recently. They started off the year as a pass-first team, and they still lean to the pass, the Chargers do. But due to all the offensive line injuries and everything else, we have seen them slowly start to gravitate back over to that run game. So those are the positive things, but I'm with you. Just enough concern about what the workload would look like. Number one, just coming back from the injury. But number two, Kamani Vidal's played really good. Here's what I'll say. If Omarion Hampton is out, I will move Kamani Vidal further up the ranks than where I have Omarion Hampton right now, because I don't really have to worry about him sharing time. I think you could argue that Vidal in a game like this with that kind of team total and that sort of line should be a mid-range running back 2 if Hampton doesn't play. What are your thoughts?
No, I think that's pretty fair. And we have seen, the Chargers offensive line obviously continue to suffer injuries. I don't love the thought of them going up against Max Crosby and company, but only so low you can have any running back that has the potential to have that sort of 80% plus snap rate that we have seen from Vidal. So again, hopefully Hampton is back. He looked fantastic before the injury, was the RB4, RB7, and then RB22 in limited action in those final 3 games before the unfortunate sidelining. Last one, Dwain, we do have Trey Benson. Again, hopefully returning. He was limited in practice to start the week. We'll see what happens for sure, but he's someone that, man, in limited action this year was absolutely balling. Now, this is a very small sample size. I had to go down to 25 carries, so take it for a grain of salt. But, man, top 8 in terms of tackles avoided per carry, yards per carry, and explosive run rate. Now, Amari DiMercato is also up there with some of these most efficient backs in the league, but it sounds like he's likely more so on the doubtful side of things. So if we do see Trey Benson only flanked by Bam Knight and Michael Carter, how high are you ranking him?
It'll still be similar because it'll be that first game back. So I think that borderline RB2 territory. But man, I would love to see Trey Benson in a full-time role with what Jacoby Brissett's doing with this offense. It would be nice if we had all of the running back opportunities really consolidated more around one player instead of this committee. I do think that fairly quickly Trey Benson takes over the backfield from these other guys, Ian. So I think it's tough to say if it'll happen right away this week, but still right there, borderline running back 2. So I mean, he is somebody that you guys can start if you're hurting.
Meanwhile, some quick injury updates. Saquon Barkley, I don't believe is having any, major concerns here for game time, but he has been limited in back-to-back practice with a groin injury and was not on the injury report last week. So just a gentle reminder that Tank Bigsby remains one of the better handcuffs out there that is widely available. Also know Ashton Genty was seen participating in practice, so good news there for that injured ankle. Josh Jacobs is good to go. Alvin Kamara is not. He is starting off the week with a DMP. Again, Devin Neal sitting more so in that RB3 range for us due to the presence of Audric Esme and unfortunately Taysom Hill. Also know Bucky Irving could have, again, a similar workload to Chris Godwin in his return, as we mentioned before. For reference, Godwin was at a 36% snap count. Again, we'll see what happens. Could change based on how Bucky finishes up the week, but wouldn't exactly line up and rank him as a top 10 RB in his first game back. Also know Isaiah Pacheco will be returning for Thanksgiving. That moves Kareem Hunt as more, from like a top 20 spot to more of, an RB30 or so in our ranks. We also have Justice Hill out. Keaton Mitchell is another running back, just like Tank Bigsby, who, again, is widely available and would be on the cover of every single waiver wire article out there. God forbid something happens to Derrick Henry. Also have Samaje Perine returning for the Bengals. Taj Brooks is out. Perine could be a little bit of a thorn in the side for Chase Brown. We did not see him have anywhere near as dominant of a snap share and workload when Perine was in the picture. That said, Chase Brown has also become much more efficient over the course of the past 6 weeks, so maybe that could even things out. But guys, that is it on the injury side of things for now. Again, recording this Wednesday afternoon. But Dwain, let's get into it now with our sicko start, someone I actually just mentioned.
Yeah, it's Mr. Keaton Mitchell, man. And again, like if you guys go over to Yahoo and you sort by these players and how often they're rostered, as well as how often they're in starting lineups, and the rule I use is they can't be on more than 50% of lineups, it becomes really quick. I mean, it becomes really hard, really quick to be able to find a running back with any sort of projectable volume. So really the pivot play is to go with one of these running back twos that's in a really good matchup that also, like Ian just said, knock on wood, we never want this to happen. But if for some reason Derrick Henry were to miss time, Keaton Mitchell would be someone that everybody wanted to have on their fantasy team. And here's the thing, Keaton Mitchell, even with games with Justice Hill, if we look over this last month of games, we've got 3 times they've played together, Ian. And each of those, we've actually had Keaton Mitchell as the lead ball carrier behind Derrick Henry. 12% of the carries versus 3% for Hill in week 8. 15% for Mitchell versus 4% for Hill in week 9. And then last week, 7% of the carries to Mitchell versus 0% to Justice Hill. So it really does look like the Ravens have settled on Justice Hill more as their passing down back, and really Mitchell being the guy that's probably more of the handcuff to Derrick Henry. Not saying he's going to get 65, 70% of the carries, guys, if Derrick Henry goes down, but I think he would be the lead ball carrier for the team. And man, this guy is just absolutely electric. We saw it his rookie season, Ian, and we've already been seeing it again this year. If he's only touched the ball 23 times, so it's kind of like your Trey Benson thing earlier. Like, it's not like we have a big sample to go on. But we have seen this from him before, averaging 5.8 yards per carry, and 17% of his touches have gone for 10 plus yards. So playing really well. And again, massive team total here, guys, at 29.25 points against the best matchup in fantasy for running backs, the Bengals, with that 7.9 fantasy point boost. It's one of these deals, Ian, where one play, if you're in a sicko league, like one play, like could pay it off this weekend for you for Keaton Mitchell, and he gives you a running back 3 finish. And we're talking sicko leagues, guys, you don't want to be starting Keaton Mitchell unless you're in a sicko league. He's still a running back 5, so don't like get this all twisted. But I've seen some of the screenshots of the teams you guys have sent me and some of the leagues you play in, and some of you play in the 32 teamers like Ian, and you'd be happy to start Keaton Mitchell.
Wild card round this weekend, Dwain. America loves an underdog story. We'll see if the boys can get it done. But yeah, man, doesn't need many carries to obviously make it worth your while. 6.6 career yards per carry. That is inexplicably tied with Amari DiMercato. Again, always popping up in these leaderboards for the highest mark in NFL history among all running backs with, 75 career carries. So small sample, but hey, a pretty good one to be said about that. For the hardest hitter of the week, I think Broncos running back RJ Harvey really has his breakout party on Sunday night against the Washington Commanders. I'm calling for 120 total yards and not 1, but 2 trips into the end zone. Again, we kind of talked about on the utilization report show, I think it was even like last week, where like the usage was absolutely there. We just didn't exactly see it come through in the box score. So looking at this Commanders defense, they have been giving up 28 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games and just haven't been all that great, really, at all 3 levels of the defense. Bottom 10 in most metrics, measuring efficiency against running backs, and really bad, especially against receiving backs like RJ Harvey. 3rd most yards per target allowed to running backs. Dwain, I have a vision in my head. Sean Payton designs the play. Texas route from RJ Harvey.
Texas
leaves
route.
Bobby Wagner into dust for 6.
Angle route, Texas route. He could probably do that at this point in Bobby Wagner's career. I love this call. If you look at the Xfinity best ceiling model, guys, PPR scoring 23.5 points for RJ Harvey. That's right there in the same range of what we just talked about with Derrick Henry. And it's all about like the utilization that we saw before the bye week and the matchup that Ian just talked about. The Commanders giving up a 4.7 fantasy point boost over the last 4 outings to opposing rushing attacks. So yeah, it's a nice matchup.
My RB16, Dwain's RB19, far, far, far more lineups than not should have RJ Harvey starting in them. So with that in mind, let's get to some of the start sits. It's time for our Xfinity Start Sit Hour. shout out to Xfinity. Start sit hour just sounds so provocative, but in reality, it'll be about 5 minutes. But yeah, always appreciate our friends over there at Xfinity. Appreciate you guys in the chat hanging out with us as always. First of all, Rubio, I have been to Walmart many, many times in my life. I probably go there once a week. You know why? Because they sell Kona Big Wave in cans, and I freaking love Kona Big Wave in cans. Seriously though, Dwayne, start sit questions from Kenod Dalek. Would you start Sutton or Watson at wide receiver? It's a little bit closer than I kind of thought it'd be at this point, but I still do lean Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, I still lean to Courtland Sutton as well, but you are correct. It is closer than we would have thought. Xfinity best score, I've got it up in a PPR. This may be half, I don't know. But 18.1 for Sutton, 17.5 for Watson. So like you said, Ian, closing the gap. The projection for the week, 11.6 for Sutton and 10.9 for Watson. So still slightly in here to Sutton, but nice job by Watson closing the gap.
Little big man wondering about Jackson Dart versus Joe Burrow in a 4-point passing league. It does sound like that we're going to have Jackson Dart ready to go. He did practice in full. However, it's not going to be a game until Monday night. So I honestly, Dwayne, have Burrow ranked ahead. And just in case there's any funny business that goes on there, man, just give me Joe Burrow tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's me too. And if you decide to wait on Dart, it can only be because you have Jameis Winston, on your roster. But I'm with you. I have Burrow ahead, and I'm the highest ranker on Dart this week, and I still have Burrow ahead. So I would just go Burrow.
Heather's wondering about her need for 2 wide receivers and full PPR. I'm going to say Emeka Egbuka, you're starting him. So then it's one, Dwayne, between Sutton, Pearsall, Myers, Watson, or Alec Pierce. I think they got the order right. I think it's Emeka Egbuka and Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, it is for me too. And again, like these, we know that Sutton's come down a little bit, guys, but still, like he's still ahead of these other names that we just had. So, yep, agree with you on Sutton.
And Washington's been bad against wide receivers, and now they're also very banged up in the secondary as well. That is the kind of, combo we're trying to look for in Fantasyland. Last one from our guy, Greggy. Devin Neal over Tedero McMillan, Rico Dowdle, or Chase Brown in a full PPR league. They are projected to win. I'm going to go with no.
Hope to see Devin Neal do some great things. I'm not starting him over any of those players this week, Ian.
I'm with you. Dude, it's one of those things. Alvin Kamara has I think fewer than 3 or fewer targets in 5 straight games. So maybe they just decide, it's Devin Neal. Now we need to throw him the ball. But I'm just doubtful because even Alvin Kamara couldn't get the targets we were hoping for. So again, that has been our start sit segment here. We'll move on to some wide receivers next. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Xfinity. Guys, if you call yourself a sports fan, you got to have Xfinity. All the games all in one place so you can become the best at watching sports. There's a Sports Zone, which features every pro football game and over 1,000 college games, including the game, which continues to absolutely tear me up all throughout this week. Oh my God, why is my happiness so dependent on 19-year-olds? I don't know, but I can watch over 1,000 college games with Xfinity, so why not go all in? Highlights and alerts all in one place. And hey, by the way, you can watch the multi-view option, which is one of the coolest things about society in the year 2020. Being up to 4 stadiums at once. There's also the Xfinity Fan View, live scores, odds, and stats, all in one place, personalized to you. And hey, did I mention all this is going to be viewed in Xfinity Enhanced 4K, a simply stunning viewing experience. Use your voice remote and just say football to find it all. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. You can learn more at Xfinity.com. Note that restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees are extra and subject to change. Breaking down some wide receivers here on the Fantasy Life Show. Starting off, we got, of course, Mr. JSN on pace for over 2,000 receiving yards. What a freaking season there. Followed by Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, Puka Nacua, our one true sun god of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and yes, George Pickens, even before his teammate CeeDee Lamb. What a time to be alive. Devontae Adams, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, and yes, Michael Wilson rounding out the top 12. We did see Marvin Harrison Jr. back at practice, so that would not be a final ranking for Michael Wilson, but if Marv is out again, yes, get him into lineups of all shapes and sizes. Looking at our wide receiver 2 tier, we got Lab McConkey, wide receiver 13, followed by Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Emeka Egbuka, Tedero McMillan, Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 18, continue to fall down. Wan'Dale Robinson, Michael Pittman, Courtland Sutton, Zay Flowers, Stephon Diggs, and Rome Odunze coming in as our wide receiver 24. But Dwayne, we really want to highlight someone who, again, is in the top 5 and for good reason. The man can't stop, won't stop scoring fantasy points. points. Talk about Rashee Rice, someone that you have as your wide receiver 4. I even have as my wide receiver 3, going up against the Cowboys defense that, yes, has improved recently, but I don't know about you, man. I feel a lot more just, I would say, scared or like respectful of the Cowboys front seven. That's secondary, though, slowing someone down like Rashee Rice, man. I wouldn't be expecting much there.
No, I mean, A.J. Brown got him for 25 points last week, right? And it's not like this has been an easy season for A.J. Brown in fantasy. That was one of his best games of the year. I think that was his second best outing. And the Cowboys still, look, they're still the number one boost for fantasy wide receivers, even after getting a little better over the last couple of games. 7.8 fantasy point boost to wide receiver rooms over the course of this season. And then there's just Rashee Rice is awesome. We don't have to waste a lot of time on this, to be honest, Ian. I'm surprised you let me put it in the show. Because a lot of times with these players that are so high, we know you guys are starting them anyway, but sometimes like, hey, we can watch them play on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys. That's why Ian probably said, okay, Dwain, it can be on the show sheet. But 19.4 fantasy points per game for Rashee Rice since he came back to the lineup. Ian, 26% target share over that 5-game span. He's finished as the wide receiver 10, the wide receiver 3, the wide receiver 12, the wide receiver 33, and the wide receiver 8 over that span. And I'm like you, man. I honestly struggled with it. I had him as high as wide receiver 2 behind JSN. And then I'm like, okay, Jamar Chase with no T. Higgins against the Ravens. The last time we saw that was pretty freaking ridiculous. So I had to have Jamar above him. And then it was like him and Puka. And honestly, I mean, it could go either way. You could put Rashee Rice over Puka. But the point is, those 4 players, that's your tier of elite wide receivers. Actually, sorry. Sun God, I can never exclude you from the elite tier of wide receivers on a week-to-week basis. But once you put Sun God in, that's your tier. That's your top guys. Rashee Rice, very squarely in that. Man, Xfinity best ceiling this week of 26.8. And that's when I wrote the article. So Freeman must have updated the game model or something, because the article just published an hour and a half ago. And it's up to 27.4. So something happened somewhere where Rashee Rice actually picked up some points. But the bottom line is, guys, it's really good. Medium projection of 18.2. So, yeah, we love Rashee Rice. Every week we love him. Just a little bit extra this week against Dallas.
Just crazy how there's seemingly no bust to be found with him. 8 games in regular season going back to last year, guys. He scored 17, 18, 29, 23, 25, 19. Okay, 1 game at 9.8 PPR points, and then 24 again last week. So again, it's this mixture of him obviously just being an absolute demon after the catch. He leads the NFL by 10% in terms of the number of catches to have at least 5 yards after the catch. And then also just looking at it, man, Andy Reid, I don't know what it is about him getting inside the 10-yard line and just refusing to put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands, but that kind of is the case. So we actually see Rashee Rice getting wildcat opportunities and scoring rushing touchdowns from time to time as well. Again, one of the most valuable players in fantasy at this moment. So let's get into some other guys, starting off with, again, that consensus wide receiver 12, Michael Wilson, if Maserati Marv isn't going to be in the picture. So talk about, again, someone where we both have him ranked as our wide receiver 13, but where he might fall to if Marv does return to the lineup.
Yeah, so borderline wide receiver 1, low end wide receiver 1, whichever thing you want to call him. If we don't have, Marvin Harrison Jr., he's averaging 27.7 fantasy points over the last 2 games. I mean that's just insane. He's got a 96 utilization score, 186 air yards per game with 16 targets. Okay, you guys know why we've got him as a borderline wide receiver 2. Not sure how long it can last. And yes, if Marvin Harrison comes back, that would be an event that not necessarily makes me think that Marv's going to out target him, but it's enough that they're going to spread the ball around most likely, Ian, and that hurts. So I think in that case, you're looking at him retreating to wide receiver 3 territory, probably the top end though of that wide receiver 3 range. As you kind of look down our ranks at some of the names that are sitting there, I don't see myself dropping Wilson too far into the wide receiver 3 depths.
I'm with you there, man. Honestly, it's just been really impressive seeing what he's been able to do. At catch point, he's caught 15 of 21 contested targets this season per PFF. That's the second highest mark among qualified wide receivers behind only Puka Nacua. Pretty good there. Moving on, Dwayne, we got Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown going against the Bears, which in and of itself is a good matchup because AJB, as much as this hasn't been the most consistent year, he actually is second in yards per route run against man coverage, specifically behind only Jackson Smith-Njigba, and the Bears run the 10th most coverage in the NFL. We also got to consider a scenario there where Devontae Smith could be out. He has not practiced to start this week. He's dealing with an illness in the chest, and it's not another injury. So clearly working out less 100%. So A.J. Brown, Dwayne, someone you have as your wide receiver 12, my wide receiver 16. We're starting them, but there really could be boom potential here come Black Friday.
Yeah, I mean, and this is my assumptions here are that we still have, both wide receivers with Devontae Smith available. Right. So if he's not, then AJ Brown will move up a little bit. Here's the big thing. Like we get it, guys. AJ Brown's been a very volatile fantasy asset. You know what? I benched him last week for Jameson Williams, so this week I'll play AJ Brown instead of JMO, and you know what's going to happen, Ian, like it's going to flip. But the point being, despite the run heavy offense and the things that have been really problematic over the last 5 games, man, it has gotten better for AJ Brown. He's finished as wide receiver 19, wide receiver 40, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 66, not ideal, but then wide receiver 21 and wide receiver 5. Over that span, a 29% target share. And targets have not really been target share, I should say, has not been the problem, guys. It's been the volume of targets and catchable targets, but that's also turned around here recently. And he's averaging 95 air yards per game. So when you look at the Eagles, the 6th highest team total in Friedman's model at 26.8. And then you look at the Bears and the coverage things that Ian just talked about. And the Bears aren't like an elite matchup for wide receivers, but it's above average. It's an above average matchup for wide receivers. So yeah, I look at AJ Brown as being a borderline wide receiver 1 this week. If we don't have Devontae Smith, I mean, he's definitely a low. He's man, like how high would I move him? I might move him up like another 2 to 3 spots, but it gets tough because we start running into some really big names pretty quickly.
Moving a little bit down the right, so we got Wan'Dale Robinson, Dwain, your wide receiver 19, my wide receiver 20, and for good reason. Since Malik Neighbors has been out, he's been the wide receiver 19 in PPR points per game, even ahead of big names like Justin Jefferson and Emeka Ibuka. So going up against the Patriots, who we have seen be able to stop number 1 wide receivers. T. Higgins obviously had a tough time last week before that concussion. That said, Christian Gonzalez, the number 1 cornerback for New England, who usually does the bulk of the duties on number has only played 25 total snaps this season in the slot, somewhere where Wan'Dale usually thrives. So it does sound like it's going to be Jackson Dart under center, Dwain, which, yeah, Jameis is fun too. But either way, man, Wan'Dale, someone that we got to give his flowers to, especially in full PPR.
Yeah, and I think, Wan'Dale's a little misleading in my opinion. And like the fantasy community has gone bananas this week over Wan'Dale. And again, like we've talked about him quite a few times, like being somebody earning targets since Malik Neighbors has been out, been a very usable fantasy asset. The big thing that happened last week is, he got Jameis Winston. He got all of those additional air yards, all those targets downfield. Now, we did see that in one game earlier in the year with Russell Wilson. Then we saw it in one game after that with Jackson Dart. So we have had a few flashes of it. When he does get those down the field targets, and it unlocks all of this upside. So if we go back to when Malik Neighbors went down, he's averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game. He's cracked the top 24 in 3 of 8 games. So he's really been more of that wide receiver 3. And he's also had a few games where he hasn't even been in the wide receiver 3 territory. So the 14.2 points sounds really good. I think it's like a tad misleading, but it doesn't matter this week because you get the number 2 matchup like you talked about with the Patriots, and I think they'll do a good job of keeping him away from Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez also just, when you think about like what Darius Slayton and what Isaiah Hodges, what they do down the field and the kind of plays that they're asking them to run, like it just, makes more sense like that they might have Christian Gonzalez on those guys anyway, Ian. So 18.3 Xfinity best for Wan'Dale Robinson. Would have went back to wide receiver 3 territory for me, but you land the good matchup right away against the Patriots, who've also been good against the run. Not as good in these last couple of games with Milton Williams out, but I'm still going to lean into the fact that I'm going to still consider them a decent run defense, but there's problems against the pass.
Another wide receiver who works plenty of times in the slot and also set up fairly well this week. Zay Flowers going up against those Cincinnati Bengals. Dwain caught a touchdown on 6th target of the season. Since then, it's been a long, cold 71 targets without an additional score. Does Zay Flowers find the end zone on Thursday night, Dwain?
I'm going to say yes. And look, you finally gave up on him, so I thought I would pick up the mantle for you because I know you really didn't want to drop the mantle on Zay Flowers. We both think that he's a very good player. There are obvious things holding him down. They're called touchdowns. I mean, it's all about the touchdowns. And look, it's kind of like the A.J. Brown thing we talked about, Ian. Really good target share, but also a team that we just talked about that's running the ball all the time. So if you have a 29% target share on a team with like, a 48% drop back rate, guess what? You're not getting a ton of targets, but you get to play the Bengals this week, man, and just a massive team total. Like the Ravens have the biggest team total on the slate. So I'm just trying to get my Ravens in my lineups wherever I can, Ian, against the Bengals. So a sneaky Xfinity best ceiling, though, 21.3. That's actually higher than Wan'Dale Robinson that we just talked about.
Again, low on wide receiver 2 in the rank should still be in more lineups than not, even though I am begging to see a true boom like we had in week 1, which seems like forever ago at this point. Something that's more so in that boom or bust wide receiver 3 range. Packers, a wide receiver Christian Watson, maybe a little bit dependent on the status of Matthew Golden. He is questionable there for Thursday, but at the same time, I don't expect Golden's, I guess absence or him starting to really take away much from Watson, who, don't look now, leads the entire NFL, guys, in yards per target going back to week 1 of last season. So Christian Watson, Dwain, your wide receiver 26, my wide receiver 29, going up against that man-heavy Lions defense who, one missed tackle away from a potential big play.
Yeah, 7th best fantasy boost per game given up by the Lions to opposing wide receiver rooms at 3.8 per game. So we really do like that because that accounts for, the quality of the wide receiver rooms that they've played against already. But when we look at Watson, the big thing is just over the last 3 games, he's taken over that near full-time role again. He's got an 83% route participation rate. That's lower than we like, but I'll also just say, guys, for the Packers, that's a starter. Like that's if you're getting to an 83% on the Packers, that's like 105% on another team because of how often they rotate their wide receivers. Over that stretch, he's got 5.3 targets per game with 97 air yards per game. And he's just one of these guys, and you mentioned the man coverage stuff. He can really take any play to the house. It could be a slant, it could be a crossing pattern, it could be a deep shot, over the top of the defense. He can do all those things. The only thing that kept me actually from moving Christian Watson a little higher than this against the Lions is just Jordan Love just hasn't looked right for these last couple of games, dealing with the non-throwing shoulder injury that he's been, trying to work through. So hopefully Jordan Love can get healthy. But yeah, looking at Christian Watson, and also even if Matthew Golden's back, I'm not moving Christian Watson. That would be more of a Dontavian Wicks concern for me if Matthew Golden was back. So high-end wide receiver 3, but to your point, definitely of that boom-busty variety.
Lastly, Kayshon Boutte, honestly kind of a similar archetype as Christian Watson, returned from his hamstring injury last week, set up well against that Giants defense. So Dwain, he's your wide receiver 41, my wide receiver 39. The rest of our rankers got him more so around that wide receiver 4 borderline, which I just cannot get behind. Right now this season, Kayshon Boutte leads all wide receivers in terms of percentage of targets to go for a first down or a touchdown. So I know last week wasn't huge, but guys, he did draw 2 defensive pass interference penalties, I believe, on the same drive. One was a deep ball where he had his guy beat, got him, inside the 5-yard line, and then also drew another flag in the end zone after he ran a nice route. So I would say the man's due. And again, Drake May against the Giants, Dwain, like this seems like a spot where we could see all sorts of points flying on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I mean, and Bootie's just a good example of, he's just kind of gotten forgotten and lost in the shuffle, because he came back and didn't have a good game. But the main thing you guys need to know is he had an 85% route participation rate last week. So really back into, actually, that was one of his better roles of the season, so he went back to getting on the field often enough to score fantasy points. And like Ian said, you got a good matchup this weekend against the Giants. The Patriots got the 4th highest team total in Friedman's model, and the Giants are giving up a 5.1 per game fantasy boost to opposing wide receiver rooms. That's the 3rd best matchup for wide receivers. So yeah, Boutte back into that boom bust wide receiver 4 tier.
Few injury updates before we get some bold calls. Mentioned Matthew Golden being questionable. Jaden Reed is out, though. Dontavian Wicks should be good to go. Savion Williams also out in this ever-evolving Packers wide receiver room. Good news, though. Cowboys wide receiver George Pickens and Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice no longer even listed on the injury report. They're good to go for their respective Thursday games. Not so good to go is T. Higgins. Again, he is out with that concussion. Again, we'll see what happens with Devontae Smith. It is a shoulder, chest / illness designation. All sorts of banged up. Marvin Harrison Jr., though, back at practice, as is Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown joining Deebo Samuel for the Commanders. We do have DK Metcalf not practicing with an ankle injury he suffered last week. Was playing through it. Wouldn't assume he's out. Certainly a situation to keep an eye on, though. Also know Rashad Bateman dealing with that ankle, but could be back here. And also Khalif Raymond out. Isaac Tesla limited. So a lot of stuff going on. So again, make sure you guys are trying to keep an eye on those injuries as we get into the weekend. But for now, Dwain, it's time to go hard or go home. Are you guys going to go hard in your leagues and start these guys, or will you go home? This is Go Hard or Go Home, fueled by the bold flavors of Mike's Hard Lemonade, the official drink of those who go hard for their league. Dwain, sicko start wide receiver for this week.
Jaden Higgins of the Houston Texans. I was surprised I got this, Ian, but only rostered in 29% of Yahoo leagues, so I was able to sneak him in, for this. But if you look at Higgins, just the big thing, he's improved his playing time over the course of this month. The last 3 games, he's got a 21% target share, 12.8 fantasy points per game. Obviously, you guys saw what he did on Thursday Night Football. That was his biggest role of the season with a 68% route participation. People were losing their minds because how could the Texans design an offense that's going to feature Jaden Higgins over Nico Collins? I'm guessing you guys have Nico Collins on your fantasy roster because I'm with you. Like, we want Nico Collins to score points, but guys, don't fret. Like, Nico's going to do his thing. There's room in this offense to have someone else really work opposite of him. It's been a massive rotation of guys, Ian, for the course of the year, where there's been Christian Kirk working from the slot, Jalen Knoll splitting time there, and then we had Xavier Hutchinson also working in. So it's really consolidated a little bit more around these last few games. I'm hoping we see another step forward, honestly. Like, I'd love to see Jaden Higgins like at an 80-85% route participation rate as the locked-in number 2 across from Nico. That would be even better. But nice fantasy ceiling here this week in PPR, guys. 15.2 Xfinity best, median projection of 9.4. And like I said, still available in 29% of Yahoo leagues. So he's in that wide receiver 4 tier for me this week, but he offers wide receiver 2 upside.
Are you concerned he might be an even numbered week merchant, Dwain? Because touchdowns in weeks 8, 10, and 12. Like, what are you doing for me in odd number weeks, man?
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that in my analysis. Probably because I don't care. Hey, I will say this. The Colts have granted the number 4 fantasy boost to opposing wide receivers, so I do care about that. Not a huge boost, 4 per game, but still in the top 5.
Apparently, Dwain believes that all correlation doesn't imply causation. So fine, Dwain. I guess we'll go ahead and roll with that. For our hardest hitter, though, I'm going back to that Giants matchup. Not with Kayshon Boutte, though, but give me Stephon Diggs getting back to balling out, clearing 100 yards and finding the end zone. Again, against a man-heavy Giants defense that also just isn't even good. You got to be quite bad to get your defensive coordinator fired before we even get into December. So I know it was a dud for Diggs last week, and he did play a concerning 54% route rate. But honestly, it's just one of those situations where I understand because the route rate keeps fluctuating. Week before it was a season high mark. No, we can't rank Stephon Diggs as a top 15 option, but still has looked the part of being a very good receiver this year. And just again, based on this matchup and based on that Patriots O-line being banged up, I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the air more often than usual and just try to embrace one of their biggest weapons on offense. Again, against the Giants defense, I do not think we'll have very many, if any, answers for Mr. Diggs. So, again, 105 yards and 9 catches the last time he faced the man-heavy Jets. I do think that Stephon Diggs will have a good chance to go off this week. And accordingly, I have him as my wide receiver 23 and Dwain as his wide receiver 24. So feeling good there. And guys, that actually wraps up this week's Go Hard or Go Home segment brought to you by Mike's Hard Lemonade, because playing it safe is how you end up watching the playoffs from the couch. Breaking down all the top week 13 plays here on the Fantasy Live Show. Moving along now, we got our top 12 quarterbacks on the board. Josh Allen, QB1, followed by Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and despite playing through the pain, Mr. Lamar Jackson as our QB4. We got Drake May, followed by MVP frontrunner Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott as our QB7, Justin Herbert, QB8, Joe Burrow, Jacoby Brissett, Jackson Dart, and Bo Nix rounding out the top 12. So we did want to take some time to talk about Mr. QB10 right there, Jacoby Brissett. Dwain, the QB4 actually in fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks since he got that starting job, and a Cardinals offense that is tied for first in drop back rate over expected during that span as well. So potentially even getting Marvin Harrison Jr. back. It's about to get tougher in the scheduling department over these next 2 weeks. I think they have the Rams and the Texans, but at least for this game against the Buccaneers, man, wheels up, Jacoby Brissett. I can't believe how much we trust him, in the year 2025, but dang it, we do.
I think he's moved into the territory where he's now like, prove us wrong. Like, we've kind of got to keep, ranking him up here until he eventually has a bad game. And he's eventually going to have one. But we're just at the point where it's been going for too long. Over those 6 starts, 315 passing yards per game, Ian, 1.8 touchdowns per game, 20.7 PPR points per game. So looking at the source I had, that's actually the QB3. Yours was QB4. So either way, guys, top 4 quarterback over that span. And like you mentioned, the drop back rate over expected, they fully embrace that. With Jacoby Brissett's at 6% now over the span of the 6 starts that he's had, as well as using more play action. So 28% of their dropbacks have been of the play action variety. And then the final part here is playing the Buccaneers defense, man, that has given up 21.1 fantasy points just through passing production per game over the last 4 outings. So they've really been struggling. And so that sounds like a match made in heaven to me, Ian. Giving up 21.1 and you're averaging 20.7, like, feels pretty good. Good. So Xfinity best ceiling 23.7. Going to be honest, Xfinity best model, that's probably too low. Median projection 18.3 and a floor of 14.5. So yeah, my QB10, I think he's your QB9, or is he your QB10 as well?
He is also my QB10, Dwain. So we are in lockstep here. Always good to see that. And we do actually have him ranked one spot ahead. Next guy we want to talk about, Mr. Jackson Dart. You're QB11. I'm all the way down there at QB12. So feeling good about Jackson, albeit before his injury, man, this dude was pushing for a top 6 ranking. I do think going up against the Patriots in Foxborough isn't exactly, the best smash spot that we could ask for. And I also am a little bit concerned about maybe a reduced usage in the design run game, despite missing this time and not even starting until week 4 or week 5 this year. Jackson Dart still does lead all quarterbacks in rushing yards from design runs. So even that though, Dwain, I know you're actively doing it with the projections, but okay, shave off 5 or 10 rushing yards, per game from design runs. We're still looking at someone who should be a QB1 the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I took his design rushing attempts down. I think his scrambles will remain, but we really don't know how much they're going to pull it down. It could just be, hey, teaching him how to not take some of the hits. The best way you do that is just letting him do more of the scrambling instead of the design run, where the defense immediately sees what it is and they're trying to tee off on your quarterback. Some quarterbacks are still really good at avoiding injuries in that situation, like Lamar Jackson is just very slippery. But then others, take on contact. That's been a little bit more of the MO for Jackson Dart. Also a slippery player, just needs to know when to get down. But I think the big thing, Ian, is just 23.2 fantasy points per game in the games where he's played at least 75% of the snaps. That ranks second behind only Josh Allen. That's how ridiculous Jackson Dart has been this season and the games where he's been on the field. And I know it's a smaller sample than other quarterbacks, so we have to be careful, but still, he is a dual threat quarterback. And even though we don't have great weapons right now in New York, he still does enough through the air, and he typically gets the passing touchdowns, right? He usually gets 1 or 2 per game. That really helps. So if you look at his Xfinity best ceiling, it's the 6th best on the week at 24.9 points, even after me shaving off some of those design rushing attempts.
I think Jackson Dart is going to be like next year's kind of Caleb Williams, Drake May guy, where, yeah, you can get him late-ish compared to some of the other quarterbacks, but there's still going to be a consensus top 10. And then, Dwayne, when people who aren't just complete sickos like us playing all year start to get into fantasy, they're like, I'm thinking I'll really wait a quarterback this year and get this Jackson Dart guy, even though he's actually going quite a bit higher. So tend to see that happen. Nothing wrong with it, obviously, but again, just funny to see that play out from time to time. Also want to talk about Bo Nix, Dwayne, someone that you have as your QB12, my QB11. So kind of just going, back and forth there between him and Dart. For me, the tiebreaker was just the Commanders versus the Patriots. A little bit more respect for what they're doing there in New England. But with Bo Nix, as much as this season has been, I would say, disappointing from a real life progression perspective, chill out, Broncos fans. I know you guys are winning a lot of football games, and Bo Nix has been a big part of that, particularly in crunch time. He's still done a pretty darn good job as a fantasy quarterback. The QB 13 in fantasy points per game, right there at Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. So, Bo Nix, Dwayne, again, maybe not the world's greatest real life quarterback just yet, but still pretty darn good in fantasy land.
Yeah, and even in fantasy, he's really been, one of the more matchup dependent quarterbacks. When we get the right kind of matchup, either the shootout game script or a really bad defense, he's been able to take advantage of it. And we have that working this weekend. You're playing the Commanders. They've given up the 5th largest fantasy boost to quarterbacks per game at 2.8 per game this season. And over the last 4 games, Washington's been even worse. So giving up an additional 29 passing yards and additional 0.4 touchdowns per game. Through the air, Denver, 6.5 point favorites here. They got a healthy team total at 25. You put all that together in a projection model, and it's going to give you somebody that's right there at the borderline QB1 territory, which is where you and I both have him ranked for this week. So, yeah, I have Nix as a borderline QB1. I'm 1 spot below you.
Otherwise, guys, just a few injury updates. Again, Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson both in for their hopeful Thursday night shootout. Great news there. CJ Stroud also up to a full practice, okay? Hasn't officially cleared a concussion protocol yet, but usually once you do see him get to full, they pass their final test, and then he should be good to go for this weekend. I am now expecting CJ Stroud to get the start here over Davis Mills. Also know Aaron Rodgers didn't practice on Wednesday, but just based on what we've heard from Mike Tomlin, I believe that to be more of the maintenance variety. We are still expecting him to start on Sunday. And we also got J.J. McCarthy already practicing missing in a limited fashion. So I know a lot of people are wondering how long of a, return it could be from the concussion. Maybe he won't even miss a game at all. It'll be Max Brosmer under center if not. Dwain, moving on to the sicko start. I mean, this is shucking crazy out of you, Dwain. So let's go ahead and get into it, man. Who is your QB sicko start of the week?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is absolute sicko territory. I just want to put a disclaimer. You have to be in a sicko league to consider this. Like, otherwise, you can just fast forward through this portion. But it is Tyler Shuck, of the Saints, because he's only rostered in 8% of Yahoo leagues. Now, when I wrote this, we didn't have the news on CJ Stroud. He would have been a candidate for this, I believe, rostered in 29 or 39%. I have to go back and look, but it's one of those two numbers right now in Yahoo league. So he would have technically qualified for being someone I could have used as a sicko start. But this is a real sicko, Ian. This is an absolute sicko start. This is probably more of a super flex thing. And you guys have, you're playing in a 14-teamer. 8% rostered in Yahoo leagues, 4% of starting lineups. But man, he's shown some life over these last two games, Ian. 282, 243 yard performances. There's some teams in the NFL right now with young quarterbacks, the Vikings, that would probably be pretty happy to see those sort of passing performances. They might give up their Thanksgiving holiday and some draft picks for that, Ian. But if we look at Tyler Shuck, the other thing is he was pretty good. He wasn't an amazing rusher in college, but he was a plus rusher, right? This was a guy that could get you some yards on the ground. And then if we look over these last couple of games, they have been unlocking that a little bit more. Now, part of it is scrambling. He's got 3 scrambles over that period for 15 yards. But last week, he had 5 design rushing attempts because we had the loss of Alvin Kamara. We did not have Audric Estime available, and it was basically, for whatever reason, only going to give Devin Neal, passing reps. He's, I think, allergic to the line of scrimmage, rushing. So there's something with that. And so I don't know how much of that's going to play into this. I put it there as a caveat, but it is worth noting. This is something that he did do some of in college and was pretty good at it in his 27 years of, collegiate activity. Because Tyler Shuck, guys, he's older than me. But the other part here, Ian, is we have Miami giving up a 4.4 point per game fantasy boost to opposing a passing attack. So just passing, guys. 4.4 additional fantasy points per game passing over the last 4 games. They traded away Jalen Phillips over to the Eagles. So there's been some changes with this Dolphins defense. So 17.1 Xfinity best ceiling, guys. Again, not saying this is some guy that's going to blow it up in fantasy. But if you're in an absolute sicko league, Tyler Shuck's one of the names that's available. And we have seen a little bit of traction from him over the last 2 games.
Do keep an eye on Chris Olave. He suffered apparently a back injury in practice, was downgraded to limited. We'll find out. It's only Wednesday, but certainly that would impact some of the passing projections. But yeah, can't agree enough again with the rushing upside here. Obviously was something he showed off at Louisville. And man, even last week, Dwain, he got stopped at the 1 yard line on 3 separate times, even on 2 separate drives as well. So, was, a mere 6 feet or so away from having a much bigger day, at least in the fantasy streets. For my hardest heater, I'm going with Dolphins QB Tua Tagovailoa posting a top 5 finish this Sunday against those Saints. So we got both of our bowl calls here in the same game squaring off. Dwain's QB 20, my QB 22. So this is more of the sicko star variety. But I'm just impressed by this Dolphins team not rolling over and really giving up. We had a team meeting after week freaking 1, guys. Mike McDaniel was expecting to be the first head coach fired. And lo and behold, they quietly won 3 of their last 4 games prior to their bye, even blowing out the Falcons and Bills, who, let's face it, have both looked very, very good for certain stretches of this season. So with Tua going up against the Saints defense, they have struggled to get pressure on the quarterback all season long. And when I do my weekly mismatch manifesto charge, Tua actually does have the week's best advantage in terms of combined pressure rates. So I just think it's a problem for any secondary if you aren't able to get to Tua, trying to slow down Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane. So, give me a big time top 5 performance from Tua and a Dolphins offense that, again, is impressive, especially if they also get Darren Waller back. So good stuff on quarterbacks, Dwain. Let's close things out with a look at tight ends. Top 12 Fantasy Live consensus tight ends on the board right now. We got the tight end 1, Trey McBride, probably in a tier on his own at this point. Brock Bowers, tight end 2, George Kittle, tight end 3, followed by Travis Kelce, Tyler Warren, Jake Ferguson, Oronde Gasson coming back from a bye, Mark Andrews in a smash spot against the Bengals. More on him in just a second. Hunter Henry coming off the smash spot against the Bengals. We got Juwan Johnson, again, former collegiate teammate of Tyler Shuck himself, as our tight end 10, doing good things. Dallas Goedert, tight end 11. He would rise up the board should Devontae Smith be out. Honestly, I would probably say right by Hunter Henry. I put him ahead of Hunter Henry if that is going to be the case. And then we got Kyle Pitts as tight end 12. More on him. Actually, not more on him later, but yeah, he's also someone set up pretty well with Drake London out as well. I moved him up in my ranks a little bit earlier today. But Dwayne, we did want to talk about Mark Andrews as that tight end 8 because as much as the Bengals might be a nice boost for opposing running backs, that pales in comparison to what they do for tight ends. 5.7 PPR point difference between them and then the next worst defense against tight ends. That's the same difference between the 31st ranked defense, the Jaguars, and the 11th ranked defense against the position. So yeah, Mark Andrews, expect big things, or because we're hyping him up, we'll see Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kohler combined for 5 touchdowns.
Well, hey, if Andrews gets one of them, we'll be happy. But yeah, I mean, he's still the number 2 target in the offense. Zay Flowers is the number 1 guy with a 29% target share. Andrews sitting there at 17%. But hey, who knows? You might get a fake tush push that you take around the end, Ian, for like a 40-yard touchdown run. That could also happen for Mark Andrews. Or maybe you get a tush push into the end zone because it's him taking those sort of snaps and not Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. And in a game where they're expected to score a lot of points, don't be surprised if eventually that comes up. That ends up being something that helps you with Andrews in this game. But you already mentioned it, the Bengals, dude, they are boosting tight end production by 8.4 fantasy points per game. You mentioned it, looking at the total points, that's 5 points ahead of the next closest boost, which is the Dolphins, which are sitting at 3.5. So yeah, it's just one of these situations where they can't cover tight ends. And Mark Andrews, while he's not the tight end he used to be, he's still good enough to take advantage of the matchup. So that makes him a mid-range tight end 1 this weekend.
Hopefully, again, we see that entire passing game get back a little bit on track. It would make sense if this is a matchup to do just that. Next up, Dwayne, I want to talk about the artist known as Juwan Jesus doing big things recently with Tyler Shuck under center. Also just gotten a little bit healthy, and I know we had that kind of 3-week stretch where Juwan was playing a little bit banged up and just wasn't putting up fantasy points. But man, Dwayne, he's been balling out recently. He had the great start in the season. And as things stand right now, I mean, he's at tight end 13, and you can honestly move him up a little bit higher if you want to, again, take away some of the guys who haven't played as many games. So he is someone where, again, you have him as your tight end 12. I even have him as my tight end 10. Juwan Johnson going up against the Dolphins, man. What's not to love?
Yeah, and Rashid Shaheed, since he's been gone over those 2 games, and they've both been with Tyler Shuck under center. Shuck's now had, he's had 3 starts, but Juwan Johnson's averaged 14.9 fantasy points over the last 2 games. So he's the number 2 option in the offense right now behind Chris Olave. He gets favorable matchups. He gets to play from the slot. They move him around a little bit. He's got some end zone presence. Not a great offense with the Saints, but he does some nice things after the catch. So, I mean, he's a very solid tight end, finally getting to play a full-time role for the first time in his career. That's been the thing that's always held him back, Ian. We would go to get excited about Juwan Johnson. We'd see an 80% route participation. I remember we were doing this 2 and 3 years ago. And, we get on the show on Sunday night and you go like, all right, Dwayne, what was Juwan Johnson's route participation rate? Was it at 80% again? I'm like, oh man, it went to 55. We'd be like, oh damn. But every week this year he's getting it. So, and look what he's done. He's shown that we were, and not trying to pat ourselves on the back. We just saw Juwan Johnson was a pretty good player, and that's come to fruition. So also has a good matchup this weekend against the Miami Dolphins. I just talked about them being the second best matchup, not in the same tier as the Cincinnati matchup, guys. 5-point difference between that one that Andrews has, but still it's in the plus column. So yeah, Juwan Johnson, the number 2 target for the Saints. That makes him a low end tight end 1. His Xfinity best projection is 16.1 fantasy points this weekend.
And again, God forbid Chris Olave and that back injury end up being anything serious. I mean, we could be looking at a breeze up to double-digit targets there for Juwan Jesus. Dwayne, getting to the sicko start, I like this one. One of only 5 tight ends averaging double-digit yards per target this year. Talk about Jags tight end, Brenton Strange.
Yeah, and he, it's not like we have a huge sample on it, but, we'll take it. We'll take any positive that we have. But Brenton Strange only rostered in 22% of Yahoo leagues, Ian, only in 8% of starting lineup. So the Jaguars' new starting tight end after coming back from injury, guys, he might be like the number 3 option in this offense. That's what he was in his first game back. He had an 18% target share with an 80 utilization score. He finished that first game with 14.3 fantasy points. Brian Thomas Jr. could return this weekend, Ian. He is practicing. That makes things slightly more crowded. We know Jacoby Myers has arrived on the scene. Parker Washington has kind of broken out and been doing a little bit here over the last few weeks as well. So it's a little bit muddy, as far as who's going to get the ball here. But the thing I like is none of those guys, and unfortunately this includes Brian Thomas Jr., none of them are like just these huge target hogs right now, right? It's kind of like, oh, we have like a bunch of guys. Like they're all fine, when you line them up across the field, Trevor Lawrence can drop back. He can go through his reads. He can find the best read. These are all capable receivers, but none of them are dominating. And so when you look at Brenton Strange, I mean, he's in his third year. I know, guys, now if you don't break out in year one, everyone hates you in fantasy. But there was a time where the third year was really meaningful for tight ends, year 3 and 4. And when you look at Strange, he's got the path now to the full-time role. Maybe he's doesn't end up being, the alpha target earner. But I mean, this is a guy that was a second-round pick in 2023 out of Penn State. So I think there's some nice things here with Brenton Strange. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up, really being a low-end tight end 1 the rest of the way. That's where he ranks this week in the ranks. Borderline tight end 1 right there. Xfinity best ceiling of 12.8, and he's got a projection of 8.3 fantasy points.
Dwayne's tight end 15, not my tight end 15, because my tight end 15 is not even really a tight end, but we're using him as one anyway. Mike Gesicki, I think he works as Joe Burrow's number 2 wide receiver here on Thursday night and finishes with 80 yards and a touchdown against the Ravens. So we honestly saw this last week with Jamar Chase out of the picture. Gesicki came back from IR, immediately had a nice 67% route rate, but guys, 26 of his 28 snaps actually came in the slot or out wide. So that's pretty much how they're using him right now. Once Higgins and Chase are back, I think it's going to be problematic. I think Noah Fant's going to be involved, Tanner Hudson as well. It's not going to be pretty, but at least for this week, guys, with no T. Higgins, we are feeling good because why not? We had a 5-game sample last year of this, and the targets, they were flying. Just 4 in the first game, but after that, 9, 8, 6, and 9 again, had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in one of those games. So that is some of the upside we have there with Mike Gesicki, another Penn State alum. Shout out to that school that just can never win big games, but I guess they produce pretty good tight ends. Again, feeling good about Mike Gesicki in this spot. Dwayne, the 2 most drafted tight ends I had this year were Juwan Johnson, feeling good there, and Mike Gesicki, which I've been feeling horrible about. So maybe we actually get a usable week now on week 13.
Yeah, look, man, you mentioned it. 13.4 fantasy points per game last year in games without T. Higgins with Joe Burrow. So we had 5 of those. 13.4, guys. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a great call having Gesicki inside the top 10 this week without Higgins. Yeah, I love it.
And with that, guys, going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Live Show. Make sure you guys come back Sunday morning. Myself and Chris Allen will be answering all the Start Sit questions you have. But in the meantime, enjoy some food, enjoy some friends and family, and of course, enjoy some football as well. So if you like the show, then please like the show. Always helps me hit that little subscribe button as well. So for Dwayne, for producer Mick, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Happy Thanksgiving. And until next time, take care, everybody.